In the unforgiving winter of 1939, a fierce battle was brewing in the frozen forests of Suomussalmi, where a small, resilient nation prepared to confront a seemingly insurmountable adversary. As the Soviet Union's relentless march threatened to engulf Finland, a critical struggle loomed, destined to test the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. At the heart of this maelstrom stood a resolute Finnish general, aware that the fate of his people hinged on a secret tactic, the Motti, an audacious maneuver that could potentially alter the tide of the war. The frigid winds howled, and snowstorms raged as the Finns readied themselves for an epic conflict, calling upon every ounce of strength, skill, and determination within their arsenal. As the pivotal moment drew near, the general shared a solemn nod with his troops, who braced themselves for the battle ahead. With hearts racing and nerves taut, they charged into the unknown, bent on executing their covert strategy and outsmarting an enemy that believed itself invulnerable. Facing the Soviet might. In the frigid winter of 1939, the world watched as two nations clashed in the Winter War. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, aimed to conquer Finland, a small, fiercely independent country, as its location along the Baltic Sea made it the perfect choice for the Russians' need to find a buffer zone to protect Leningrad from the Germans. Finland's rich natural resources, including timber and mineral deposits, were also a tempting prize. With diplomatic negotiations failing, as Finland refused to yield to the Red Nation's demands for territorial concessions, the Soviet Union invaded Finland on November 30th, 1939. Amidst the turmoil, the small town of Suomussalmi emerged as a strategically important site. Positioned along the Rata Road, Suomussalmi connected the Soviet Union to Finland's heart. Control of this critical junction would enable the Soviets to strike deeper into Finnish territory and potentially cleave the country in half. In the dense forests and frozen landscapes of Suomussalmi, a David and Goliath struggle was about to unfold. The Finns would have to rely on their knowledge of the terrain, tactics, and unyielding determination if they wanted to stand a chance against the Soviet war machine. Additionally, the enemy failed to account for the sisu, defined by Finlandia University as, quote, a Finnish term that can be roughly translated into English as strength of will, determination, perseverance, and acting rationally in the face of adversity. Sisu is not momentary courage, but the ability to sustain that courage. And the Finns were willing to put it to the test. The frozen battlefield. On December 7th, 1939, the Battle of Suomussalmi began, as Soviet forces, led by Major General Alexei Vinogradov, crossed the border, intent on capturing the strategically important town. As the outnumbered Finnish defenders retreated, they skillfully employed the scorched earth tactic, leaving behind a barren landscape. The Finnish troops systematically targeted infrastructure, setting fire to buildings and destroying critical transportation networks. Their actions were intended to slow the advance of the Soviet army by denying them access to essential resources and making it difficult for them to resupply and reinforce their troops. As a result, the Soviets faced significant obstacles and were forced to find new ways to navigate the difficult terrain and continue their advance. The following day, the Soviet forces attacked through the lakes west of Suomussalmi. However, Finland's harsh winter conditions hindered their advance, and they failed to break through the defensive line. Despite their numerical advantage, with about 30,000 troops compared to Finland's initial 2,000 defenders, the Soviet offensives continued to falter. Meanwhile, Finnish troops received reinforcements from the fresh battalion, led by the intrepid Colonel Hjalmar Selasvuo. Their numbers grew to around 11,000 soldiers, and Selasvuo, a courageous leader, reorganized the units, inspired his men, and prepared for a daring counterattack to recapture Suomussalmi. The Soviets, now struggling with low morale, heavy casualties, failing tactics, and equipment shortages, faced another enemy: winter. While the extreme temperatures during the winter of 1939 challenged both sides, For the Soviets, the unfamiliar terrain exacerbated their difficulties in logistics and maneuvering. Meanwhile, the Finns were ready to take advantage of their intimate knowledge of the land and their experience with the severe winter conditions. As Soviet morale continued to sink, the stage was set for a series of dramatic clashes on a frozen battlefield, where the resilience and resourcefulness of the Finnish troops, along with a secret technique they had up their sleeves, would be greater than any weapon. Masters of disguise. The Finnish men had an exceptional ability to adapt and thrive in the unforgiving winter landscape. Undeterred by the frigid temperatures and treacherous terrain, these tenacious soldiers demonstrated unparalleled mastery of guerrilla warfare. Possessing a deep knowledge of the land, the Finns navigated the harsh environments to outmaneuver the Soviet forces. They employed hit-and-run tactics, striking swiftly, then vanishing into the dense forests, leaving the enemy disoriented and off balance. Additionally, Finnish soldiers capitalized on their familiarity with the landscape by using skis to glide through the snow-covered forests with ease. This unconventional mode of transport allowed them to move silently and rapidly, taking the Soviet forces by surprise and ambushing them with devastating efficiency. The Finns also demonstrated their expertise in camouflage, blending seamlessly into their surroundings, making themselves nearly invisible to the unsuspecting enemy. They expertly utilized natural materials, such as branches and snow, to disguise their positions and equipment, further confounding the Soviet forces. The critical factor in Finland's success during the Battle of Suomussalmi was their ingenious implementation of the Motti tactic in mid-December 1939. This unique and effective approach to warfare proved to be a game-changer in the conflict. Named after the Finnish word for an enclosed space, the Motti strategy involved encircling and isolating Soviet forces into small, confined pockets, effectively cutting them off from supplies, reinforcements, and communication with their command. The Finnish troops created these perilous traps with their unparalleled knowledge of the terrain and mastery of guerrilla-style tactics. The Finns cunningly lured the unsuspecting Soviet forces into narrow passages or dense forests where they could be easily surrounded. Once encircled, the isolated Soviet troops found themselves trapped in a lethal game of cat and mouse. With no escape route and no hope for reinforcements, they were systematically picked off one by one by the relentless and resourceful Finnish soldiers. All or nothing. On December 27, 1939, Finnish troops, motivated by the steadfast leadership of Colonel Selesvuo, initiated a fierce and decisive counterattack against the surrounding Soviet forces. Launching their massive counteroffensive, Finnish soldiers struck from multiple directions, employing hit-and-run tactics to keep their adversaries off balance and demoralized. As Finland's forces relentlessly pursued the enemy, the Soviets found themselves in a desperate and precarious situation. Finland's unyielding efforts led to the successful recapture of Suomussalmi, further weakening the already fragile morale of the Soviet forces and prompting their eventual withdrawal. The battle reached its peak with intense firefights, close-quarters combat, and unparalleled bravery from both sides. Facing overwhelming odds, the Finns, driven by determination and a fierce will to protect their homeland, annihilated entire Soviet units. This relentless offensive forced the Soviets to concede defeat and retreat, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The casualties underscored the stark contrast between the two sides. The Soviet forces suffered an estimated 27,500 dead, wounded, or captured. On the other hand, Finnish losses were considerably lower, with approximately 900 casualties and 1,770 wounded. Ripple effect. The Finnish victory in this brutal and unforgiving conflict became a symbol of national pride and resilience, boosting morale throughout the country. On the Soviet side, the loss was a significant blow to their confidence in their military prowess. Finnish Field Marshal Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim later praised Colonel Hjalmar Selesvuo for his leadership during the Winter War. Mannerheim stated, quote, Your troops have fought with extraordinary bravery, tenacity, and skill under your capable leadership. With the enemy's bands scattered to the winds, Suomussalmi is now once again under Finnish control. You have thus achieved the task assigned to you. You have a right to be proud, as have your men. The psychological impact of Suomussalmi extended beyond the battlefield. The Finnish victory served as an example of what a smaller, well-prepared, and determined force could achieve against a larger, more powerful adversary. This galvanized the Finnish people to continue their resistance against the Soviet invasion. Despite the Finnish success at Suomussalmi and in other battles during the Winter War, the overall outcome of the conflict favored the Soviet Union. The Moscow Peace Treaty, signed on March 12, 1940, ended the war and forced Finland to cede 11% of its territory. For their part, the Soviets seem to have taken valuable lessons from the Battle of Suomussalmi, which may have contributed to their later success in Operation Barbarossa, where they would face and ultimately defeat the invading Germans on their own harsh terrain. Despite the Soviet Union's eventual reputation as the undisputed masters of winter warfare, it was the small yet fiercely determined Finnish forces who demonstrated their remarkable skill and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, proving to be a formidable challenge for their larger and more powerful adversary. Thank you for watching Dark Ducks. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Battle of Suomussalmi and the incredible story of Finnish resilience, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And for more captivating stories from military history, turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Stay tuned.